That sounds very official. So, today, as you probably already know, we're going to be talking about continuing in this series of the one-story versus two-story universe. Today, we're going to focus on the one-story universe in the context of relationships, relationships with each other, as well as how it impacts our relationship with God. And not just relationship, but our actions, our behaviors, perspective, a whole bunch of stuff, and we'll go from there. So, to start off, I figured I'd throw up an image up here. Any astrology buffs in the room? Anybody into astronomy, the study of astronomy or anything like that? Anyone? No? Okay, I'm not necessarily either, so don't misunderstand. But I did stumble across this recent, scientists recently mapped out a very small portion of the universe, if you will. And what you see here is, it's called a supercluster, this whole network. And believe it or not, this network is all galaxies. And it's there's 100,000 superclusters. This is a one of 100,000 superclusters. In this supercluster, the Milky Way is a dot. So it's one of the dots on the end here. So if you can put that in perspective, that our world, our universe as we know it in the Milky Way, is a dot, and there's 100,000 of them on this, and this is just a sliver of it. It's a pretty, it was a pretty impactful study article that I read, and again, my mind just started going to like the Psalm, "Great is our Lord, and mighty in power, His understanding has no limit." And I just started thinking about how, in the context of a two-story universe, that had certain feelings towards it. If you feel that God is upstairs, and we're down here, that makes you feel a certain way. But in a one-story universe, a little different. And funny enough, this supercluster in Hawaiian, it's called Laniakea, which basically means immeasurable heaven. They actually termed it, the official term, Laniakea, which means immeasurable heaven. So the question I have for you guys is, when you see that, and given the fact that the Milky Way is a dot in this little thing, how does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? Like, what words would you use to describe the feelings that you get when you think about that and put it in context?
Small.
Anyway, small, insignificant to some degree, right? What else? Humbled. Basically, I have small, insignificant, humbled are the three that I write. So see if you say any more that I actually listed myself. Go ahead.
At first, small and insignificant.
Yep.
If you wrap that into how we should feel, in the sense of as the church, completely different.
Yeah, true. But the first gut reaction is small, insignificant, humbled. Any other? Irrelevant, I heard. Anything else? Yeah.
I initially felt interested because
Interested.
Why do we not know anything about any of these other places if we're such a small portion?
It's a good question. I think it's the limitations to what our technology can reach,
right,
to try to understand the universe beyond ours, which God created. I think humans sometimes have trouble understanding that we're simply not as smart or, omniscient or omnipotent as God, But we got a glimpse to how powerful and almighty the creator of the universe really is, and that's the context I look at. It's like, wow, we got this tiny glimpse. There's hundreds and thousands of these superclusters. Think about that. It's just insane. It's insane. So,
awesome? Like, I'm just in awe.
Awesome. In awe, yeah. So, a lot of the terms that we all just talked about could have both positive and negative connotations. So what I want to say is, the only way that you would feel small or insignificant or alone or isolated would be in the context of a two-story universe. However, in a one-story universe, those words mean something else. And that's the point of the image. So we'll talk about this awareness of God. What we're going to talk about today a lot of is, first it comes with awareness of God in a one-story universe, right? And how that then affects your perspective, okay? Your perspective on life and situations. And then how, when your perspective changes, your behavior and your attitude and actions automatically change. So, moving on. First we got to kind of level set the whole context of what we're talking about. And, what's the pride of Christianity? Ultimately, the pride of Christianity stands out as the religion in which the Creator meets the created. We've studied this quite a bit, thanks to Buddha Mike. Our Lord raises all humanity to himself. Not part of humanity, all humanity. And just as St. Athanasius the Apostolic says, the Logos assumed human nature in its entirety. So the word entirety there gave me a certain feeling. It's not just the good people, the Christians, or just, no, human nature. Human nature, all human beings. I even interpret it as all human and the world and the life that exists today that we know, creation, things around us. He united himself with all of those things. And to me, that's the context we have to keep in mind throughout the discussion tonight, because, if it affects our relationship with God, obviously, but obviously that's going to affect our relationship with others, because God united himself with everybody, right? All of creation. So obviously that's going to affect our relationship with other humans, other parts of his creation. So this truth, as here's Joe, this truth that Joe talked about, the truth of, or who the truth is, Jesus Christ being the Son of God, the incarnate Logos, will affect everything once we kind of have that context. So next thing I'm going to throw up there is perspective. I say that awareness of God in a one-story universe changes our perspective, and this slide certainly tells you how perspective changes depending on your situation, depending on your awareness of what's going on. So again, when you start kind of mapping it out, I'm sorry this is a little philosophical. In the beginning, I have some of this philosophical end, but then it gets much more practical. But I just want to give us some context to the discussion. So perspective is everything, right? Which changes your perspective, changes your attitude, right? And look on things. Obviously, this was one of the poll questions, and I was asking, where do you put yourself? I forget, are we supposed to review the poll now or later? But I think, Joe, what was the majority on the poll? I think it was, I don't have it up here, but...
Do you want me to pull it up?
Maybe at the end we will, yeah. So, anyone who knows me would say that I am definitely a, thankful, I'm happy to have a glass and that there's something in it, and, thank God, right? I can see the silver lining and everything, but it doesn't make me any special than anybody else, right? My wife, on the other hand, she's the extreme opposite, okay? It's like, what glass? You don't use the glass. It's gonna fall. It's gonna break into pieces, and there's gonna be pieces of glass in the carpet and the deep in the shag. And I gotta get the vacuum cleaner and vacuum it, and it's gonna step on it someday. And it's just like the Seinfeld episode I remember where he talks about that. So obviously, a perspective. My point here is a certain awareness of God in a one-story universe will certainly change our perspective or influence our perspective. I feel strongly about that. With awareness comes a different perspective, a mental view regarding things in life, which in turn will change our attitude, our behavior, and our actions. And I stumbled across this. So Dr. Wayne Dyer, he's like an American self-help motivational speaker, and he has one of his first books was called Your Erroneous Zones. It's one of the best-selling books. It was like 35 million copies. And I thought that the quote was pretty powerful. The state of your life is nothing more than a reflection of the state of your mind. And again, that comes with this awareness of God in a one-story universe, and changing your perspective will definitely change the state of your mind, which in turn changes the state of your life. And that's really the gist of this discussion today, is how our life truly changes with this one-story universe in our mind always. So what does it all mean? So the next part I want to talk about is, in a one-story universe, and when you're truly grounded in that God is existing in all things, the eternal God who created Lanikia, right? The same God united himself, the uncontainable united himself with the containable, right? The infinite to the finite. He chose that out of his love to unite with us. He took what is his, gave us what is his, right? Took what is ours, gave us what is his. He took our humanity, our creation, etc., our world, and united it to his world. So, with that said, what we're going to talk about is, with all that, and you take that in, our ability to kind of dial in or tune in to God when you live in a one-story universe is pretty powerful. So, anybody ever work in the... So anyway, just another way of saying it, again, the one-story universe, the eyes of the Lord are everywhere, keeping watch on the wicked and the good. From heaven the Lord looks down and sees all mankind from his dwelling place. So, again, the Psalms and the Proverbs are filled with the one-story universe and how it affects our lives. and how it changes our perspective of God, our relationship with Him. So anybody ever work in the restaurant business? Anyone at all? Yeah, it's, who else? So Sandy, okay. I have too. I think I started in 7th grade. I was a busboy, believe it or not, 7th grade. I didn't have working papers. And it has to be the noisiest, craziest environment on the planet when you work in a very, busy restaurant, okay? Extremely noisy, stressful, beyond belief, okay? Noisy, screaming, people yelling at you, you're spilling food on you, you're getting burned. It's ridiculous, okay? I can't think of a more hectic environment in the whole wide world. And one of the things I want to share with you guys tonight, in my, I would say in my high school, early college years, I read a book by a person by the name of Brother Lawrence. He's a 17th century Carmelite monk, so in France. And he wrote a book called The Practice of the Presence of God, and sure enough, the ministry, the Divine Ministry, has a gift for everybody here. For anyone interested, we have all this book, copies of this book. So if you're interested, take them, pass them on to each other. This book truly, it helped shape my spirituality in a tremendous way when I read it. It shaped my prayer life, mostly my prayer life. And the reason is Brother Lawrence felt that having a proper heart about mundane, simple tasks in life, in every detail, having a certain heart about it made it a completely different experience. What did he do in life? He was the chef, okay, not this chef, not the chef in Hell's Kitchen, but he was a chef in the monastery. And in his whole thing was in his world as a chef, he felt the same awareness and awe of God in that chef, in the hecticness of that environment. He felt was the exact same tranquility and awe as if he was before the altar in front of the Eucharist. So if anyone wants to go to page 30, that's the most famous line in the book. We'll read that because it's pretty impactful. So page 30, it's at the bottom here. This book has two portions. It's got conversations and then the actual letters from Brother Lawrence. So if you go down, does anybody want to read it? It starts with the time of business, if anybody wants to read it. Anyone volunteer? Time of business? I'll read it if you want. Go ahead, Sandy.
I don't mind anymore.
Go ahead, you read.
Okay. Tell me when to stop.
Sure.
The time of business, said he, does not with me differ from the time of prayer, and in the noise and clatter of my kitchen, while several persons are at the same time calling for different things, I possess God in as great tranquility as if I were upon my knees at the Blessed Sacrament.
Yeah. So what do you guys think of that? What do you think of that ability to possess the same tranquility and awe of the presence of God in a kitchen environment? Do you think that that's something that's attainable? Is that realistic in our world of complete chaos in our lives with work, school, ministries of sorts, family? We're going to talk about that to some degree, but your gut reaction or any reaction to that reading, anyone at all? Is that something that's achievable only for Brother Lawrence, or is that achievable for all of us too? And I think the point is, the name of the book is The Practice, right, of the Presence of God. That's a very interesting way to put it, but it takes, obviously, practice. Brother Lawrence, it says that he spent 10 years, took him 10 years to master that art, if you will, or that true virtue or skill, to truly feel the one-story universe, if you will, no matter what his environment was. No matter where he was, it didn't change. The reason why it affected me personally was, as many Coptic Orthodox young boys, we were taught the Agbeya was your prayer life, right? I had a very structured prayer life, which I'm not going to say is a bad thing, but it was essentially like, I woke up, I read Prime, I did my Our Father, I did the Prime, and I did Prayer of Thanksgiving, so it was very structured, and then compliant at night, and it was a very structured way of prayer. My prayer life was structured. Now, when I read this book, it kind of opened my mind a little bit about, how that may change, I want to use an analogy, and I'm looking at Fedi, about prayer life. And Fedi, what's most enjoyable? When you mimic or copy a song that was written that you need to rehearse for a concert. I play the guitar. I've done that quite a bit. I would learn, whatever rock and roll song, and I would mimic it. Or do you learn, once you have a grasp and understanding of the chords and the scales, free-form? What do you think? What do you find the most enjoyable in music? Free-form music playing, or just mimicking something?
Well, absolutely. When you improvise.
Yeah. When you improvise or free-form,
yes,
it's a whole different
yeah.
thing, right? It's a whole different experience. And I would argue that, think about it in the context of prayer. Without the structure of the Psalms, okay, without the structure of scales, notes, and such in music, I would never be able to freeform, and improvise on the guitar. And the enjoyment of freeform is beyond belief when you play any music. If I didn't keep up with my scale and my notes on the guitar, there's no way I would be able to go with freeform music. I would never be able to play. I parallel that exactly with prayer and with the Psalms. Instead of learning, the musician, if you will, the most talented, if you're going to study music, Mozart, if you're going to study art, Picasso, if you're going to study prayer, who do you study? David the Psalmist. He is the master prayer man, right? He mastered the art of prayer. And when we mimic him and learn his basic notes and keys and scales of prayer, we can take that, put it in the context of what Brother Lawrence is doing. But without it, I don't feel like I could have ever experienced prayer the way, nor will I ever, the way Brother Lawrence did. So it's kind of interesting how you need both, right? You need structure. We do need the Agbeya, and to me it was everything. But it didn't become the end-all, be-all of my prayer. It was a starting point, right? And I kept it in my life because I know it's the basic structure I always need. So then in my free-form prayer, I find myself using David, the psalmist's words, right? And then it takes me to a whole other level. So that's why this book was so impactful for me, because nowadays, I don't have as much time for structure. I don't have as much time. I definitely have not been praying the morning in the compline. I even used to pray during the day, nearly as much and regimented as I used to in my youth. No way. But I do find myself, at this stage of my life, praying in general more than at that stage in my life, right? A heck of a lot more. But it's in the time when I'm running, right? As Abuna and I have talked, when I'm running, like alone on a path, the spirit of prayer that I have is incredible. It was equal to the time of prayer in church, or if I'm reading the Agbeya or the Psalms, right? I've also been able to, in the chaos of work, also pray. And so it's become more freeform, if you will. So I want to just have a couple more quotes from Brother Lawrence real quick. He talks about, nor is it needful that we should have great things to do. We can do little things for God. He even says, I turn the cake that is frying on the pan for the love of him. And that done, if there's nothing else to call me, I prostrate myself in worship before him, who has given me grace to work. So basically he's saying, everything can be done in the medium, in the context for the love of God. He gave me the grace to work, he says. Afterwards, I rise happier than a king. It's enough for me to pick up a straw from the ground for the love of God. We need not only to recognize God intimately present with us, we need only to recognize God intimately present with us to address ourselves to him every moment. Again, that's a one-story universe, God ever present. Lift up your heart to him during your meals, in the company. The littlest remembrance will always be the most pleasing to him. We don't need to cry out very loudly. He's nearer to us than we think. Again, one-story universe. He's everywhere, ever present. This is not just a Brother Lawrence thing. This is certainly in the scripture. Even the fathers, when you read, we don't need to read it. I don't want to get too wordy. That's the most wordy slide of the whole night. But St. Basil the Great says the exact same thing differently. When you sit down to pray, when you eat bread, do so in thanksgiving. Always mindful of him who has given to you for your pleasure everything, right? To relieve you when you're sick, etc. In the end, he even says here, I like when he says, give thanks to God who created and arranged all things for your benefit, to have you know, love, and praise their Creator. So what St. Basil is saying there is everything that God created was for our benefit, to just know him better, to be in communion with him more. That's the gist of the message. And that's what Brother Lawrence was living in his life. Everything he had from his work, he felt a gift from God so that he could know God better. He was praying during the time of work because he felt that was a grace from God for everything he was doing. He even says, for every dish he sent out that he made, he was praying for the person, that was receiving the dish and thanking God for the food that he has to fill his souls. Every little detail in your life you can put in the context of God in everything we do. Before I go on to the golden rule, I think in today's culture, the chaos we all live in, if we only wait for formal settings to be in communion with God and to pray, what's going to happen? It will just pass by. You will never meet him. I think it's very unrealistic in today's world, and probably back then too, to only rely on our formal settings to meet God and to be in communion with him and to pray. The key, I believe, in life and in prayer life is to be able to do it throughout the day. And every little detail, in life, when you're at work and you're using your skill sets and you're around people, just stop and think about God gave you that job, gave you those skill sets, etc. Thank him for it. Pray for those around you, just randomly. Ask for their prayers, right? It's just that context of God ever present and united with his humanity and with all creation will give you that spirit of prayer. And again, it was said beautifully last week when Abuna mentioned with Jacob's ladder, as soon as you put the one-story universe, right, and that God was present in that spot where that ladder was present, how awesome is this place? Every place you go will be awesome if you feel that God is there. And I believe strongly, in Thessalonians, was it 5:16, I believe it is, rejoice always, pray without ceasing. That always troubled me. How do you pray without ceasing? Is that realistic? And that's one of the poll questions. What does that mean? Some folks were wondering, what does that mean? Does it mean you stop and open your bag and pray? No, it just means, where's your mind? Where's your mind and where's your heart? If they're constantly focused on God and you feel like God is ever present, everything you do automatically becomes prayer. And that's praying without ceasing. Right? Well, what do you guys think? Is that change your view at all as to what it means to pray without ceasing, or the one-story universe? Does it make sense? I'm just wondering what your thoughts are. I've been talking for too long. So, yeah, Joe.
I think absolutely, because if we think that we have to be in a certain place or in a certain type of environment to encounter God, like only in church or only when we're in front of an icon, which, not to say that those things aren't good places to pray, but if we think that those are the only places, then that doesn't make sense if God is all around us. If God is in all and filling all and everywhere present, then of course that changes your idea of when you can pray and that you should be praying unceasingly.
Sure. And what we'll talk about too is why are we blinded to his ever-presence? And we're going to get to that. Why is it so easy for Brother Lawrence to see it and feel his presence, but why do I struggle with that? And we're going to get to that.
Could I just say, one of the priests that I used to serve with, he would say that you can pray while doing anything, but you can't do anything while praying. And what he was really saying was it's important to have consecrated time of prayer each day, where that's all you're doing. But while you're doing anything else, which is exactly what this
it's like continuous,
you're in the presence of God, and your mind and your heart are able to engage with him.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I think a mind that's constantly in the presence of God definitely grants you more purity. With more purity and holiness, in the sense of holiness in your life, it becomes clear to see Him in everything you're doing. It becomes easier and easier as you practice this art, if you will. I don't know what to call it. Art's probably not a good word, but it's a practice of the presence of God. It really is. It's constantly making your mind aware that He's ever present in everything, in His creation and in other human beings. That He's called all to unify Himself with all humanity. So it certainly takes practice to be in communion with Him at all times. So by all means, if you're interested, let me know what you think of the book. It certainly was an impactful read for me personally that carried through my whole life, if you will. Again, and one of the things it literally, I would choose 2 times when I would force myself to think of God's presence. Times of complete silence and when I'm isolated, like on a run in a path in nature. But I also found it fun to also force that awareness of God in a one-story universe in the most crowded situations possible, like on a subway or in the streets of Manhattan. I would just stop, like on the street, and take it in, if you will, and think about all the humanity around you and everything kind of working in chaos. And when you stop for a moment and take it in that God had united himself with everyone around you, with all of the creation around you, that all this stuff around you was so that you could know him better and be in more communion with him. When you stop and do that, it's pretty amazing. It's a pretty amazing feeling. And the more you do it, the more you force yourself to stop, it just becomes easier and almost automatic. Everything you do becomes more aware of God's, ever-presence. So I'm going to switch gears now to about basically how this affects our relationships with others and how we behave with others. And I threw up there the golden rule that we've always heard or teach our children, and I wonder how golden it really is. Do to others as you would have them do to you. I have trouble with this rule because I think it's limited. I really do, and in the Christian view or the Orthodox view, that's certainly in my mind not the view. So anybody think of Easter night or Christmas night in the Coptic Orthodox Church trying to find pew space? I think of this image. It's absolute chaos. So everybody comes on the major feast days from out of the woodwork, right? Packs up the church, and lucky us, I guess some of the deacons where we're up in front, we don't have any space issues, but unfortunately our wives suffer the most, or our significant others. I'm going to share a story actually. My wife, Sylvia, when we were upstate in the other church, she was pregnant with Matthew, my son, who's now 6, and my daughter, Demiana, was about a year and a half at the time. And she went to the bathroom, and she had a spot in the pew, and when she came back, someone stole her spot. So there was like a little space, so she tried to get over there, and she kind of squeezed her way, and the woman kind of gave her a dirty look, right? It's like, and Sylvia's stuff was there, all the baby stuff's there, but the person just took her spot, right? Because it's Easter night, and they wanted to get a good spot in the church. So when we were doing the procession around the church during the actual feast, my daughter waves to me, okay? And I had been in this church for many years, so everybody knew me in the church. This person had just visited. They hadn't come in a while to the church because it was feast day. Anyway, when my daughter waved to me in this procession, the woman said, "What? Timmy's your husband?" She's like, "Yeah." She's like, "Oh," and then she moved over and moved all her stuff and made all this room. "Oh, Habibti, oh, you're so cute." And Habibti in Arabic is Habibti is my daughter, if you will, or my beloved, right? Everything changed when she knew that she was Timmy's wife, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous, and it was hilarious. But again, obviously the golden rule didn't apply there. So my point of this is, in my mind, the golden rule is limited. I believe strongly that you treat everybody, not as you would treat yourself, but as you would treat Jesus himself, as you would treat God himself. Sometimes that's difficult to do, but again, when God has united himself with all humanity, with all creation, that means he's with everybody. He's present everywhere. So if that's hard to put in context, I sometimes, we'll get to that later, about practice, things you could do to put that in your mind more, but the golden rule is definitely limited. I throw this up there too, because we always have some partiality based off of what you know about a person, right? I am guilty of sometimes going into a certain setting, and instead of feeling God is present and God is with every human, we judge sometimes, right? I went for a haircut 2 weeks ago, and I'm sitting there waiting for a haircut, and there's a guy with the barber, and the barber's got tattoos off his arms of actual scissors. Okay, I'm like, wow, this guy's hardcore. He's got tattoos of scissors on his arms. That's the guy I want to get a haircut from. He must be awesome. But he's talking to this young guy in the chair, and they're like, he was right out of the Jersey Shore, Goomba kind of thing. Like the accent, and they were using kind of poor language, and it was very loud, and I just wanted a haircut. I'm like dreading, when I'm in that chair, do I have to continue this conversation, or can I just get a haircut, right? So I'm judging the guy. I'm totally judging. I'm like, I just want to get a haircut, and I want to move on. And I don't want to have the whole boom, like, yeah, you're going to the shore, and you got to go to the bar, and all this stuff. I just didn't want to do that. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't go to bars, and I just didn't want to get into that conversation. Anyway, I sat down, it was my turn, and I'm a little standoffish, I'm a little quiet, and we start talking, and his entire mindset changed. He had a young boy my son's age, and we start talking about how we parent, and we start talking about how you help develop a sense of respect for elders and for everybody around you with our children. And he's teaching me, and he's making me feel like the biggest idiot, because he was essentially teaching me and giving me pointers on how to better raise my children. And I felt horrible, and I was asking God for forgiveness. I cannot believe I prejudged this person. God is no more, no less. You don't know the person's relationship with God, period. And you don't know what kind of blessings or words of encouragement you can get from someone until you recognize that God can truly speak through that person at any moment, regardless. And that totally, and now we enjoy speaking, right? We enjoy staying in touch. I put Mr. T up there because Mr. T is a born-again Christian, right? He actually, after Katrina, he sold all his gold, okay, gave it to the poor because he felt like it would be a sin to have all that gold while you have people perishing. And, if Mr. T came by you, you're not going to think that. You're not going to think, this man is deep, okay? This man sold all his gold, and, what made Mr. T, he got rid of in a heartbeat. So that's why I threw that up there. And there's many celebrities and folks you would never know. But that goes for everybody around us, right? You just don't know what that person's relationship with God is. You don't always think God loves this person just as much as he may love me. It's period, right? His love is eternal. It's overflowing. It has no limit, and it's for everyone. And he can speak to you and give you a word of encouragement through anybody and through anything. So anyway, that's why I put that up there. The other thing is, again, I think about just practically every day. You never know. Say I'm driving like in the car, you never know, and somebody cuts you off, right? And you're like, oh, what's that guy doing? And you just want to yell, road rage, right? You ever had the experience where someone cuts you off, say in the church parking lot, and then you drive by and like, oh, that's Abuna, oh, that's Gidgu, or, that's my uncle. You just never know, who you're encountering. So before you go and start, feeling a certain way about someone stealing a parking spot or cutting you off and this, you don't know who's in that car, and you don't know, how saintly that person could be. The other thing is, the experience I had, the smile, it scares people. I'm sure people have heard it. I stop at a Dunkin' Donuts every morning, or I used to before my wife got me like an espresso machine, but regardless, I used to go to the same Dunkin' Donuts every morning. But actually, my wife bought me a machine and I stopped going. I popped in one morning, and I know the people that work there, and when I go in, I'm like, hey, how you doing? I know them by name. And she goes to me, the person who normally makes my coffee, and I literally walk in and it's ready to go. Okay, my Dunkin' Donuts is ready to go. She knows what I want to get, cream and sugar, medium coffee. And she's like, where have you been? I'm like, what? She's like, I haven't seen you in weeks. I'm like, yeah, my wife bought me an espresso machine. I'm saving money. And she's like, every morning I sit here at this time. I know when you come, and I look forward to seeing you because your smile just brightens my day. And it's something that I look forward to. And I was just like, oh my God. And I'm like, thanks. I was like totally blushing and shy and stuff. And I was just, she's like, you have no idea how much I look forward to just your smile on, crummy mornings where I'm just having a bad day. And I never knew that, right? I'm just always a bubbly kind of guy. I like meeting people randomly and getting to know them and talking and drumming up conversation. I never knew, and I never think how that person's receiving it and how it's affecting them. The point is, again, this affects our relationships with each other, right? In a one-story universe, you never know what that person's life is, and you don't know through your relations with others, when you're bringing God everywhere, how you might be affecting that person. I've heard stories where, you guys probably heard the story where a boy, somebody dropped his books, he was, and somebody helped him with his books and helped him go home, and they later found out, and they befriended each other. That boy, his plan, they said, was to go kill himself, to commit suicide. But because someone showed him some love, some help, true, genuine care, it saved his life. And that boy the other guy never knew that was the case, right? Your smile can save someone's life. Bringing Christ with you in a one-story universe wherever you go can save lives. And I know we don't think about we're saving lives out there. That's God's will, that's in his control. But when we allow ourselves to unite, him to unite with us and be in communion with him, and he's unified with everyone, he'll use you in amazing ways. And you'll affect so many other people in your lives. It truly scares people when you're a smiley type. I hear it all the time at work. People are like, why are you smiling? What are you smiling about? It's like Elf, right? Smiling's my favorite. But it's true. It's like when you smile a lot, people think you're crazy. You're either flirting if it's the opposite sex, right? You must be flirting. No, I'm just being friendly, right? Or you're just on something. You know, people used to think all the time Tim was on something because I smile too much. So anyway, a thank you or a warm smile can certainly save a soul, and you really know what that impact is. I think the problem, again, in a God-centric, one-story universe, all behavior and attitude changes. And, one thing that can certainly change, I jumped ahead, is in how we do charitable gifts, how we help others. If you really looked at a person in need and truly saw Christ himself, how would you behave? How would you behave? If we saw our own father, our own brother, our mother, sister, nephew, whatever, in need, do you feel like you're doing a charitable thing to help that person? No way. You're doing what's instinctive. Okay, you're doing what naturally, it's intuitive. I'm going to help my dad who's on the ground and who fell. I'm not going to even think about it. With that said, if we see Christ in every human, in every situation that we're in, shouldn't we be even more intuitive to help him? And I always had a problem when, I think constant awareness of God's power, his grace, his eternalness automatically humbles you, as we said earlier. And you will automatically notice him more in other people and other situations. Humility in my mind, and I might have read this before, I don't know if it's in my mind or if I read it, but it's not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. It's replaced with this ever-awareness of God in his eternalness in this universe, in our world. It's not, I'm humble, I'm terrible, and there's always this misconception of what humility is, like feeling bad about yourself. It's not feeling bad about yourself at all. It's just you're thinking less of yourself, and thinking more of others. It's not thinking of it's just thinking of yourself less. It's really simply stated. Humility is not an effect, right? It's the cause. The cause is this constant awareness of God in a one-story universe. It's the effect of that. You don't say, I want to be humble. No, it's the opposite. Humility comes automatically. You'll start helping others because you're just thinking of yourself less and thinking of God more. That God is united to everybody and everything. It will become instinctive to help that person, hold the door open for them, do this and that. You become completely unblinded to your surroundings and the needs of those folks around you. It's amazing. I've been with folks that don't even realize, a door, slammed in somebody's face, or don't even realize somebody's struggling across the road like an elderly person. They just walk right by. And that's something again, when you're around in like Manhattan in a really crowded street and you see someone in need, you just see people flying by. No one's even aware of the need of others because they're thinking of themselves. It's a self-centered universe, right? They're not putting themselves last. They're just thinking of themselves. As soon as you truly live in a one-story universe and you're thinking less of yourself and more of God, the blinders come right off. And you start to see so many things and situations where someone is in need. And it's not like, oh, I'm going to go be a good person and help them. It becomes instinctive. Just as if they were your own father, brother, mother. If it was Christ himself, you wouldn't hesitate. And I think that's the key to truly impact our relationships with others in this world. No person exemplifies this more than Saint Bishoy. You guys are probably familiar with Saint Bishoy. Saint Bishoy, that's why I put this up there. They call him the righteous and perfect man. Okay, I won't get into why you call him that. And he defended the faith, and at the same time, that's Christ sitting on his shoulders. And there are many stories of this Saint Bishoy where he literally met Christ. He met Jesus. He was known to, when he saw strangers, to take him back to his cell or wherever, wash their feet. take care of them, clean them, do whatever was necessary, no matter who it was. And there's a story where the disciples, his other disciples said, we want to meet Jesus. We know you've met Jesus. He's like, all right, well, he's going to be on the mountain at so-and-so time and place. We'll go meet him. So apparently one day, all the other brothers went on top of the mountain, and just picture this. They're all running ahead, and he's kind of the elderly man with a cane, and they all ditched him. And on their way, there was an old man lying on the side of the road. They all ran past that old man because they wanted to go see Jesus, right? They're thinking about what they want to do. And they all passed that man. However, St. Bishoy saw the man, and he lifted him up. And I've heard some stories say that he brought him back to the cell, and others that say he continued up the mountain, and it started getting heavier and heavier. And then he realized it was Christ himself. And then Christ appeared to him, and I believe said, your body will not decay, and so on, and, glorified St. Bishoy. And that was it. All the other monks missed Christ. It's not that they missed him, they just didn't see him. What he ended up saying to them was, he told the monks they all had seen Christ, but having closed their hearts, they didn't recognize him. And that struck me, that story, when I first read it. They just didn't recognize him. And it's like, they just saw him on the side of the road. They saw him, but they didn't recognize him. Why is that? They're thinking of themselves. It's not a God-centric mindset. They were just thinking, I want to get the glory of seeing Christ. They saw him, but they didn't recognize him. And then I thought about myself. How often are we missing opportunities to meet Christ in our daily life? Where is Christ in our daily life? And we're just walking right past, and you just miss the opportunity to meet the creator of that supercluster, Laniakea, right? That insane, eternal God, the infinite God. We miss that opportunity, I believe, daily, because either our own sins are polluting our view of Christ. We live in I live often in a self-centered universe. I'm not thinking of others first, Christ first, and then others. I'm thinking more of myself. So it just struck me, his story being very applicable to this topic. We definitely truly need to practice the presence of God on a regular basis, see him more in everything we do, and encounter on a daily basis. I want to close with one story, because I think I'm going a little long. But anyway, I do have one story where it's pretty similar. It's kind of Tim's version of the St. Bishoy story, and I'll give you some context to this experience I had. I believe I was I was engaged to Sylvia, my wife at the time. It was around 2002, and she was living in Staten Island, New York, and I lived upstate New York. So about an hour and a half away from each other, and so there were like these long commutes that I used to do. I'd go from work, go meet up with Sylvia, come home like 1 a.m. Around that time, I had read like either a wives' tale or a story called Along Came Joe. And it was essentially a story, and I'll cut right to it, where there was a person that was stranded in the middle of the road. It's very similar to the story of St. Bishoy. It was a stormy, night, and he was stranded on the side of the road, and everybody's passing him by. However, one person picked him up, put him in his car, brought him home, fed him, took care of him, and that ended up being Christ himself. And I read that story, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And again, it just put my mind as to not being blinded to all the opportunities to meet Christ in our daily lives. Like, we can truly meet him. So put that aside. I had read this story a couple of weeks prior to this event. So I'm coming home from Staten Island, and it's about 1 a.m. Snow's coming down. I do remember it started to snow in Staten Island, but where I grew up in upstate New York, if it's an inch on the ground in Staten Island, it's like 5 inches in Monroe, New York, where I grew up. So I'm getting home. It's 1 a.m. I'm tired. I'm hungry. It was a work day. The snow's coming down. It's, like I said, 1:30 in the morning. Snow's coming down, and I just want to get home. I'm just thinking, I just want to get home safely, right? Sure enough, I'm going through my town, and it's desolate, right? It's starting to become like whiteout conditions. And there, I saw a person on the side. He had a piece of luggage, and he was by like where the buses are. But there were no buses running at that time. And I stopped, and he kind of waved me down, and he's like, "Can you give me a lift?" And I said, "Sure. Where are you going?" And he said, he wasn't on my way at all. Okay, it was way past my house. Okay, on some really windy roads. I'm like, "Wow, you live out there?" I'm like, "Okay." I remember being reluctant. I'm like, "Am I really going to do this? This is really dangerous." not just the conditions, but I wasn't accustomed to picking hitchhikers up at that time. So I pick them up. What?
Now you are.
I actually am, believe it or not. I have another story after this where, anyway, hold that thought. I wasn't until this time in my life. But I do have a problem. Well, let me finish the story, but I do have a problem. I have trouble passing people ever since the story. So I pick him up, and he's telling me how to get to his house. It's about 20 minutes past where I live. It was really dangerous. We're sliding all over the place. We're hitting it off. Like, I am talking to him. We're talking, I don't know how, but we ended up talking about the church for some reason, you know, so what's your story? And we're talking and we're sharing, yeah, this and that. Anyway, I get to his home, and it's really dark, like I said, and we live where there are no street lamps, and I hadn't actually seen his face bright yet, okay? I didn't know what he looked like yet. So finally, when he opens the door and the lights go on, I see him, and he's just, I don't know how to say it, but his presence was different. It was very bright. He was this huge smile, okay, full of teeth. It looked like he had too many teeth in his mouth, let's put it that way. He had bright blue eyes, and I go, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. He goes, oh, my name's Joe. I was like, okay, and it was like, it just, the whole story of Along Came Joe, and he was Joe. Sure enough, I turn around, so we say goodbye, and I turn around to make like a K-turn to go back the other way, and when I put the headlights to see where he was was gone. I didn't see him. And I remember like turning my car like this, like, where did he go? And I remember looking on the snow tracks to see where and I couldn't find him. He just disappeared. Strange. Was it Christ? I don't know. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is I didn't see him anymore, and that was it. It was the most, I can't describe the experience. It sounds like I'm making it up. I'm not making this up whatsoever. I am always skeptical of these stories, you know, especially when you hear them in the Civic SAR, but I experienced it, and it was this intense, insane feeling. I threw that in there. You know, when the Civic SAR has some crazy stories sometimes, but anyway. But anyway, this was something that truly impacted me, and sure enough, yes, from that point forward, I never ever passed hitchhikers. And I actually, a few weeks later when I told Sylvia the story, she was in the car, and I stopped and picked somebody up while she was in the car, and I was like, wow, that wasn't very smart. Well, you know, we always start to overcomplicate things sometimes, and it's danger, we'd never do that, whatever, but yeah, I end up, from that point forward, I've done it many times, and it's just a thing I have to do. So with that said, I just wanted to close with that story, because again, it's kind of like a version of this. Everything could be summed up, and then this is the last slide, with this famous passage from Matthew 25. Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. The righteous answered him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, and naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? And the king will answer and say to them, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to the least, or one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me. I mean, that's right out of Christ's mouth. I truly believe that. I truly believe that we miss these opportunities to meet Christ when we are focused in a two-story universe, when we're always thinking of ourselves first and not filling our minds with the awareness of God, ever present with His creation. And I think we got to encourage each other all the time, because we're always up and down. We all need the encouragement to practice the presence of God, just as the book says. You know, it does take practice, but the good thing with anything that you practice, when you do it, it becomes easier and it becomes just natural. And just becomes a way of living. So that's it.